Hey everybody, and welcome back to BK's Bullets. Today we're talking The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. Hey everybody, welcome back to BK's Bullets. I am Brent, and today I want to talk a little bit about a graphic novel I read earlier based off watching The Defenders last week. Reignited my interest in Daredevil. So I was looking in my Comixology account, things I haven't read that I bought on the super sale, and I came across The Man Without Fear. And I've read the first issue of this. It was given away for free on one of the sales or something like that. So I never read the whole thing. So I read the whole thing today, and it was just okay. Just okay. And I know Frank Miller has a long... I got my Hornhead shirt on here if you can't see it. Anyway, Frank Miller has a long history with Daredevil. He's one of the most lauded creators, probably up there, of all Frank Miller stories. Really, if you look back, people don't really talk about good Frank Miller good Daredevil stories until you get to Frank Miller. Gene Colan had some good art. I've never heard about the story. Stan Lee started writing it. Never heard about those stories. They're not talked about on the same wavelength as the initial Spider-Man Fantastic Four stories, at least. I know Innocenti had a run on Daredevil. Haven't really heard a bunch of praise on that. But you do hear about Frank Miller writing and being an artist. You do hear about Frank Miller with David Mazzucchelli on Daredevil Born Again. And sometimes you do hear about Frank Miller on Daredevil, The Man Without Fear, the origin story that he wrote and had John Romita Jr. draw back in the, I think it was mid-90s, early 90s. And, as well as now you have Bendis, who had a pretty legendary run. And I think the best run after that, at least that I've read, was the Mark Waid run that just recently finished up. If you have not read the Mark Waid Daredevil that came out in the last 5 years or so, definitely check that out. Great, great run. Very fun, very different from all the mopey, broody, gloomy Daredevil that we've had over the last, 50 years or something like that. But anyway, back to this graphic novel. This is John Romita Jr. after he has found his style. And if you know John Romita Jr., you know what I'm talking about. Early John Romita Jr., if you go back to Iron Man, Demon in a Bottle, he looks just like his dad, or almost like his dad, and very anatomically correct, very kind of not stylized, but just classic comic book art. Then I think as he got into, maybe it was X-Men or Iron Man or something like that, he kind of got into his rigid, blocky style that you've seen on everything from Kick-Ass to Amazing Spider-Man, and now he's putting it out on Superman for DC. He was doing Batman, All-Star Batman with Scott Snyder. So the classic John Romita Jr. now has entered, and that's what he drew Daredevil as, in that classic blocky style, which I love. I'm a fan of it. I know it's rubs some people the wrong way. John Romita Jr. can sometimes be one of those, love him or hate him kind of artists, but he definitely knows how to tell a story. He's definitely efficient with his pencil work and his art style, and as long as he can capture a mood and tell a story through the visuals, you can't really fault him if you don't like the way he draws somebody's jaw or somebody's head. You know what I mean? So there's that. So John Romita Jr., great art throughout. As far as the story, I think it was a little short. I think it was 5 to 6 issues. I read it in one big chunk, so I'm not quite sure, but we'll go with 5. They were all pretty long issues, at least 20, 30 pages each. But I think the problem was that it spent a lot of time on the beginning of Matt Murdock's life when he was a young child and his dad was a boxer. There was at least, I want to say, 2 issues of that where he, I don't even think he went blind until the 2nd issue. Maybe it was the very, very end of the 1st issue. But there was a lot of time spent with young Matt as like a 10, 13-year-old boy getting beat up. And basically the idea that he got called Daredevil was because he was so afraid at the time, because his dad was a boxer and a mob enforcer, and he told his son, "You're not going to be anything like me. You're going to be somebody I can, you're going to be proud of yourself." So he spent young Matt spent a lot of time, in Frank Miller's story anyway, studying the law, studying the rules, and spent so much time studying that the kids outside started calling him Daredevil because His dad was Batlin Jack Murdoch, or Jack the Devil Murdoch, or whatever, dressed as a devil. That's kind of established in this storyline in one frame. And you know, Daredevil, basically they were calling him they were calling him the opposite of what he was. He was not a daredevil. He was afraid. He was a coward. He was a chicken, that kind of thing. So it was kind of to make fun of him and point out that he would never be a daredevil. So they called him Daredevil, and that sets Matt off a few times in this comic book. Even when he's not actually being called it, he's just imagining in his head, remembering, you know, his childhood. There were some other things in the story I thought was weird. He killed a few people as Daredevil. Now I know there's not a one rule with Daredevil like there is with Batman. I'm gonna break your one rule. Thank you, Dark Knight movie. And so, you know, I don't really have a hard feeling about that. It was surprising that it was there. I was disappointed, I guess, because I never really thought of Matt Murdock as a killer, and it's not really, there's no, at least to my knowledge, there's no big story where Matt Murdock kills somebody or lets somebody die, you know, Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy kind of thing. So that was surprising there. On his first outing, some woman falls out of a window. Well, it's not some woman, she's a prostitute or whatever, but she lands on the ground, dies. There's another guy, I think he kills two guys. He puts them into the ocean and stabs them. Stabs one, the other guy drowns, doesn't bother to save him, sets off an explosion that blows up the dock that they jumped off of. So really kind of Frank Miller-y, I guess you would say, even though Frank Miller still, when he wrote Batman, he had those rules that he stuck to. You know, that's why you have the whole line in Dark Knight Returns about rubber bullets, honest, that kind of thing. So, very, very interesting, but as a whole, it was just kind of okay. And I think that's because it was, there was no clear delineation of when the issue ended and when it began. Some issues had a cliffhanger and bled into one another. Elektra was introduced and then quickly removed over the course of 2 issues, and you never saw her again. It was just kind of a setup of, here's when they met, you know, here's how they fell in love, and then, you know, boom, 20 pages later she was gone, never to be seen from or heard of again. So it's all kind of, I guess it was like might have been retroactive setup for his big Daredevil run back in the 80s, which I haven't read yet, and I'm going to get to. I have those omnibus volumes on my Comixology account. So all in all, it was okay, and I think that's kind of why this is one of the lesser mentioned or lesser known Daredevil stories by Frank Miller, because it is so not as great as the other ones may have been or may be. I don't know, I haven't read them yet, but just going by reputation, you know, that's kind of why this one, I guess, doesn't get mentioned often. So anyway, it does pretty much define, I think, what Daredevil Season 1 was going for on the television show. They lifted heavily from this. Everything between Nelson and Murdoch, you know, Foggy Nelson, their relationships lifted from this. The black costume with the hood, or the mask that covers the nose up and no eye holes, definitely lifted from this graphic novel. His fighting style, stuff like that, you know, definitely lifted from this. So if you want to see where they got their inspiration from on that first season, definitely check this out. If you just want to read an okay Daredevil story, check this out. If you want to see earlier John Romita Jr. artwork, that's not what he's doing today, but, you know, still early, check this out. But other than that, I'd give it 3 stars out of 5, I guess, if I had to rate it. So that is me talking about Daredevil, The Man Without Fear by Frank Miller and John Romita Jr. Thank you guys for watching. As always, you can like, comment, and subscribe down below. Let me know what you thought of this. Is it your favorite Daredevil story? Please tell me why. Tell me why I'm wrong. Tell me what I missed. And let me know and make me go back and read it. Also, the Kingpin. He's there, but they never meet. So I thought that was weird. But thank you guys for watching, and as always, I will see you guys in the funny pages.